Well, welcome back to the channel, everyone, and this is my first match of 2023. Okay, so first match of the year, and to be honest, first match since September last year. Last match I fished was at Medlands. Put a link to that one up here. Live match at Medlands. That was really good fishing. I've not been match fishing since then. We had the World Champs that I went and covered. I started a new job, and to be honest, chub fishing has got in the way. I've just been chub fishing mad. It's been brilliant. I absolutely love my winters chub fishing, but the time has come to come out of retirement and start match fishing again. Now, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. My voice is absolutely useless today. Basically, I've come back from the Big One show, and I've just, as always, I'm ill. Don't know what it is about them shows, but you always come back with some kind of virus. Last time it was COVID, this time it's just whatever. A good old-fashioned cold, I think. But my voice is just starting to come back, but it's been a bit of a rough few days. But anyway, Big One show, thanks to everybody who came and said hello. It was a really good show, actually, especially for nufish, because, you know, very much in the building phase. We're getting to know everyone. We're getting to meet everyone. And some of the like comments and chats we had with people was just fantastic. So thanks everyone who came. We had a great show, and that is the main thing. And like I say, if you went, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Let us know if you came and saw us, if you bought some of our floats. They were very popular on the stand, and it was great to see so many of you guys who'd seen the videos, who'd even commented on my videos, guys who, you know, I only ever see a comment, but I'm actually meeting them face to face. It's really good. So thanks everyone. Now let's get on to the main topic. So it's time to come out of retirement. Like I say, not been match fishing for ages. It's time for a midweek open. Now, the weather at the back end of the week is looking tragic. Snow, heavy rain, not good for fishing. So I'm going to sneak onto a Wednesday match this week, and the best option at the moment around these parts is Makins Fishery. Now, Makins is very much a venue on the up and up again. Obviously, it was one of the very original forward-thinking commercials, and it's going for a bit of a refresh at the minute. Phase 3 used to be a series of snake lakes. Now that's been changed into bigger lakes. Phase 2 was the same. Now that's bigger lakes. On Wednesday is Phase 1 on Lake 4. Now, Lake 4 is predominantly an open water lake. There is an island in it at one end. One bank's very deep, one bank's very shallow. I've not actually fished it before, but the Makins lakes tend to fish quite similar. There's patterns to it. Big fish you're targeting. The only difference is with Lake 4, it's had a recent stocking of F1s, so that's unusual for Makins. There aren't many F1s at all. There's an odd one, but not many. So it'd be interesting to see if they play a part. But there's no doubt about it, we're going to need some carp to win. Maybe a few skimmers. There might be a spell in the match where I could target a few skimmers. They're quite big fish in there, the skimmers. You know, they could be £2 a piece, but if I'm going to do any damage at all, it's going to have to be carp fishing. And I fancy a couple of methods, really. Obviously, it depends where you draw, but there's a couple of methods that I fancy implementing. The first is bomb and bread. I think that'll be the best way to spend the first few hours at the very least. Chucking it about the peg, maybe 15 inches up to sort of 25 inches off the bottom. It's quite a deep lake, like I say, so varying the hook length and popping the bread up will be important at different depths. Lightest bomb I can get away with, 10 grams, 15 grams. Sometimes it can pay to have a heavier one on when you're fishing bomb and bread, but I found like that 15 grams, like a square ICS or something like that, will be perfect. So that's going to be the main attack early. I will set up a feeder, a banjo feeder with like expander on the hook or punch bread on the hook. That could be good. If I can't catch anything on bottom of bread after 2 hours, I might be tempted to chuck a little feeder and leave it in a bit longer and just wait. If there's any carp about, I should be getting signs. And if I'm not, then obviously I'm not on the bulk of the fish, which means I'll have to change my approach a little bit, and that's where changing to a feeder might come in. Also, it doesn't hurt that you might pick up an odd skimmer and maybe some of those new F1s as well on it. So I'll have 2 rods set up, bomb and a little feeder. And that leaves me onto the pole. Now, the pole is a funny one at Makins this time of year. Carp obviously stay away from you. The big fish, it's clear water, it's very cold. It's so cold this week. But the long pole might come into play in the last hour, 90 minutes of the match. Might just get some fish on a long pole. So I'm thinking 16 metres, see what the wind's like, but 16 metres, 14.5 metres, as long as I can hold and fish properly. I'm thinking something like hard pellets. That could be quite good. Just 6 mils. I don't want to feed like micros and corn, for example, because I just feel like the F1s, skimmers and stuff might just eat all the bait when I'm not on it. So I can't build it up properly and get a picture of if there's any fish actually eating my bait when I try it. So I'm thinking hard pellets out there. And I got tipped off by my good mate Denty, James Dent, that at the weekend they had a talent pathway, a guru talent pathway, and a lot of the kids caught good skimmers and F1s over ground bait. So I'd be a fool not to put a little line in for that, even if it means only spending half an hour on it throughout the day. You never know, I could catch a quick £10, which, looking at these conditions and looking at the forecast for the back end of this week, an extra £10 could be quite valuable. So that'll definitely be worth doing. I'll probably put a bit of ground bait in there, some F1, and then maybe a bit of I like Super Crush Green, probably 50-50. That'll be a nice mix, and just a few dead maggots and micros in that. Nothing fancy. So the bait bill's super cheap. A couple of slices of bread, a little bit of corn maybe just to try on the bomb, some 6mm pellets, a few micros for the banjo, and then some maggots and a touch of ground bait. So a few different options, but not a lot of bait really. Like half a pint of 6mm would be more than enough. A pint of micros is more than enough. I'll probably take most of them home. A pint of ground bait again. I'm literally going to feed like little blobs like that. So that's what I'm thinking on the bait front. So thinking about rigs for the match, big is going to be probably best when it comes to this venue. It's a big open lake. It's deep, like on some pegs on Lake 4, on the like pegs, I don't know what they'll probably put in, like 3 to 13, but there's a bit there in the middle where it's like a top 4 of your pole, like a top kit and one section. It's top 3 nowadays, but I still call them a top 4. So you need a proper float on. I'm thinking for the silvers, something like this bull could be perfect. 0.6, nice and stable. I've got some 3/4 of a gram and gram set up as well, should I need them. But I'm thinking that could be a really good float pattern. It's got that nice body shape so I can hold on to it, but it obviously means that I can have plenty of stability with a bit of finesse with that 1.5 bristle. So I think that bull could be perfect. For my hard pellets, I'm guilty of always trying to use a float that's too light for hard pellets, whereas I think, because I'm fishing for so few fish on the long pole, like if I catch 2 or 3 carp on the long pole, then I feel like that'll be good. So I just want to make sure everything's as stable as possible, everything's right, I can see it. So I'm going to go for a 4x18 Cypri, which is a big float. It takes plenty of shot, 3/4 of a gram that is. I just think that is going to be the float for hard pellets, and I'm going to use a shotting pattern which I've spoken about in the past, but it's one that a lot of people use for silvers now, and it's a tapered shotting. So I'll have like 8s, like 10mm apart, then getting further apart, 20mm, 30mm apart, till they end up about, I don't know, 6 inches apart. And then that sort of staggered, tapered like setup shotting just gives a natural fall without being too positive, as in a bulk and 2 droppers. Still, because in that depth of water, you've got to imagine the fish are taking the bait on the drop. So having that nice little bit of fancery, that nice bit of fancy shotting might just give me an odd bite on the drop, because there's no doubt about it, lifting and dropping at this time of year can definitely work, and having a shotting pattern that allows me to do that will work nicely. So there we go, that's it. That's the pre-match rundown. I'm really looking forward to getting the match kit out again, I've got to be honest. Probably be saying get me chub kit out tomorrow when it's absolutely belting down with snow, but we're going to give it a go, and we've got to start somewhere, and tomorrow is my start. So let's get on it. Let's head over there in the morning. We'll get the flask prepared, get over there, buy some pellets from the fishery shop, and we'll see you there. Wish me luck. So the day started off really well. Into the draw bag I went, peg 10 on Lake 4, which on my research, peg 7 to about 11 were the fancied areas. Peg 13 had won a match the week before, right in the corner, some people caught up the edge, and there was maybe a chance on the other bank, but peg 10, pretty much exactly where I wanted to be honest. Now peg 11 was in, super close. Matt on the next peg was super close to me, but it still gave me plenty of scope to search the main body of the lake, which I felt like would be important. Didn't see any fish moving as I was setting up or anything like that. And it actually caught me off guard how deep it was when I was setting up. I don't mind admitting that when I was plumbing up, I actually needed a longer rig. So I actually had to put my rigs back on my winders and put another one on. Anyway, the plan I sort of went with before was exactly what I decided to go with. I plumbed up at 16 metres. The wind was off our back, which was really nice. Made it actually possible to fish with a long pole on that day. So 60 metres, where it was about, I don't know, like rough estimate, 10 foot deep, something like that. The 4x18 Fishery was chosen. 016 main line, 011 reflow power line, hook length, 16 B911 hook and a band. And that black zip was prepared for that line. From a short line at 13 metres, again, it was a proper depth there. I went with the 0.6 bulk, which sat lovely. Because of the wind, there was not really any toe. 0.6 just sat there lovely. And again, I actually started on the orange zip, 8 to 10, but as you'll see later, I had to change to the white. So the starting hooter came, and I decided to pot in one ball of ground bait with a few micros and a few dead maggots in at 13 metres and about 50 hard 6mm pellets. Now, when I'm feeding 6mm hard pellets like that, I like to just give them a quick dunk. It's a good idea to have a few holes in your pot so the water can dribble out. A quick dunk, ship them out and pot them in super accurately. And then always, when I'm feeding like this, I always like to keep my pole out there together with the pot on and ping a few pellets at it just to get my range almost, and pick like you'll see a shadow or something on the water that you can accurately line up with and ping your pellets in, which is important. You want to be as accurate as possible. When you're only feeding, the plan was to only feed 2 pellets at a time. You want them going in exactly where you want them. And with the pole lines fed, it was out on the bomb. Now, I set my hook length at about 3 foot to start with. Well off bottom, and I've put 2 discs of 10mm bread on. Again, a size 16 KKH hook. I love those hooks, nice and sharp, nice simple hook that's nice and sharp. And a nice, just a 15 gram bomb, just big enough to get there nice and quietly. No feed at all. And my first cast, I hadn't chucked it out before the start, and my first chuck, I chucked it out and I was expecting it to fall like 10 metres short of the rope, but it went literally a foot off the rope. More luck than judgment, probably a little bit further than I hoped to start with. I wanted to work my way up to the rope, but it was a good place to see if there was any liners. Now, immediately after, I don't know, 8 minutes of my first chuck, I started to get an odd little liner. There weren't what I'd say carp liners though. They weren't like proper slow pulls or anything like that. They were just tiny little taps. And Matt next to me had already caught an F1 on the feeder. Now, I've got a funny feeling that there was a ball of F1s sat between us because basically, every chuck in, chuck my bread out, it gets about 8 minutes of the chuck. I'd get tap, tap, tap like a dace on the river, and it felt like the bread had been taken off by an F1 perhaps. So I ended up having to cast in a lot more often than what I really would like. Obviously, when you're fishing like this, you want to be chucking in and leaving it in for like 15 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time, but it just wasn't possible with them F1s. I think there was a lot of silvers out there, a lot of F1s, and like I say, after 8 or 9 minutes of the cast, every single time I'd get tap, 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 and a small F1 would have pinched the bait. And obviously, because everything was so light, I just wasn't hooking them. I had one fall off, I pricked one. It was a bit funny to start with. However, despite the F1s and the small indications that I was getting, I was starting to get an odd big liner, and the chap to my right was also getting an odd big liner. Nobody had really caught a carp or anything at this point. I think a chap 2 to my right, 3 to my right had caught one maybe, but apart from that, it was very slow going and it was freezing, I've got to say. It was 0 degrees when I got there, and I don't think it got above freezing all day. However, after about 50 minutes of casting about, trying to find some fish, I finally got the pull round I was after, and it was a carp, it wasn't an F1. Matt, by this point, had caught 2 or 3 F1s. There'd been a chub caught to my right, a proper chub as well, like a 4-pounder, real nice fish, one I'd be happy with on the river. And I'd finally got my first carp. Now, it was a bit of a battle, this was. As you can see, we got a 10-foot superior, magnitude reel, 5-pound main line, 017 hook length, and that 16 hook. But the fish were really pulling hard. I sort of wound him in, nice and slow, but then eventually he just tore off across the lake. It went through next door's line. It was just a right old palaver. And but eventually we got him in, a real nice plump 8-pound mirror, perfect sort of breadfish, absolutely nailed in the bottom lip, like the best hook hold you'll ever get. And it was just one of those fish that was never going to come off in a million years. Perfect sort of fish to start with. Hopefully I'd found a little ball of fish, because that one came probably 5 metres short of the rope. I've been getting an odd liner and I thought I'll drop a little bit shorter, and boom, I got one. So, and it was on about 8 minutes of my cast, so it was a nice sort of bit of information that I could hopefully use for the next bit of the match. So I fully expected to go out and catch another carp, because oftentimes when the hardest part is finding them, and once you caught one, you're kind of away. But it took a little while actually. I caught an F1, I caught a hybrid of about a pound, at 10 ounces a pound, something like that. And it was a bit like frustrating. The chap two to my right, who actually went, the chap two to my right had caught a couple now, and the chap on peg 5 also caught one. And it was, I was starting to get the feeling that the fish were to my right on pegs 5 and 7, the bulk of the fish. Like I say, I hadn't had many what I'd consider carp liners at this point. That carp was a bit out of the blue, but I was still fancying that it was going to be a low weight kind of day, and that if I could just catch a few fish on this, then maybe it would give me a chance to catch on the pole later on. And then it was a case of just trying to catch on bread, but it just wasn't really happening. I dropped in on the pole just to have an early look. I always like to just have an early look, because sometimes it's not that I want to fish it, it's for building the swim later. I want to see if any bait's gone, I want to see if there's any fish there. If I go in and there's a roach or chuck, for example, you've got to imagine that them fish have eaten all your bait or are eating all your bait, so you may need to top up more regular. But if I go in and get no indications at all, I can believe that most of the bait's still there on the bottom, and I've just got to wait for the fish to turn up. So having an early look is important. Like, although I wanted to fish the pole in the second half of the match, I think it's important to get a gauge early whether you need to up the feed, up the regularity of your top ups, whether I need to up the feed basically. Incidentally, I've gone out on it and I've caught an F1 pretty much straight away, a little one, and I caught a roach, and I think I bumped another fish, but it wasn't solid by any means. So I was quite happy that my big pot full of bait, most of it would have probably still been there, but I did top it up with a tiny little nugget of ground bait, just as a suggestion more than anything. Quick look on the 60 metre line, but as predicted, nothing there. I didn't expect a carp to be there, but again, if I went out and I was getting mired with roach on 6mm pellets, then I would have to up the feed or change how I was feeding it, but there was no signs at all, which I was happy with, because I could just build that nice and slow. Back on the bread, and the bread was slow going, really slow going. It just wasn't happening, and to be honest, the F1s were becoming a bit of a nuisance at this point. I don't know, that sounds bad, but when you're trying to sit and wait for a proper carp, it can be quite frustrating when you're just getting tap, 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 tap on your bread. So I tried corn, which never actually brought me any joy. I felt like bomb and bread was the right approach, but those F1s, I either needed to get my head down and catch them or chuck somewhere else, and I just couldn't really find any indications anywhere. So with that in mind, I decided to chuck a feeder. Now I've got a 30 gram Banjo XR on, which was about right. I got my 2mm pellets, and I decided to go with bread on the hook to start with. 2 discs of 6mm bread, a nice hook bait. I noticed my good friend Stu Polster has been catching loads of fish on that at Boddington and stuff, so I just felt like that was a nice one to start with, a nice hook bait. Out it went. I was fully expecting it to rattle around with an F1 or a skimmer, but after 8 minutes it went round, a proper like jaggedy bite, a fast jaggedy bite, but it went round and we got carp number 2 of the day. So we caught number 2 safely in the net. Nice fish, not as big as the first one, but a nice fish and all the same. I felt like maybe the feeder might be the option, and maybe the fish wanted a bit of bait, which was quite a nice thing. The chaps to my right who were all catching on bomb and bread, but the fact that I caught that on a feeder was quite promising actually. A bit of a lean, typical Makins mirror actually, and old as the hill sort of fish. There's loads of them in there. Now, I chucked out again, and immediately was getting signs, and I felt like the F1s had found the bait at this point. Caught on F1, and I lost a couple because they're quite small. They're like 8-ounce fish, and they're obviously a bit of a pain. A couple of taps on the rod, pick up, bang, bang, off. So that was frustrating. If I was to fish it again, I'd probably chuck a little bit different. I'd use an elasticated stem with probably like a white zip or something like that in the stem. Something soft that would handle the carp, but obviously give me a bit of play for them F1s. They're a bit of a nuisance. I'd probably go for a softer rod as well. The 10-foot Superior that I use is brilliant for carp, but it's a stiff old rod that is, and for F1s it isn't quite right. So I thought after that I'd settle into a nice little routine, but we're at a halfway point now and it's just not really happening. The liners have stopped, all my indications have stopped, and I kind of feel like the fish have gone. They've vacated the premises. I've had 5 or 6 chucks now on the feeder, and I've probably pushed the carp away, which is this is the downside to chucking a feeder. It's all right if you're chucking it out and leaving it out there, but the problem is with those F1s, it meant I was having to re-chuck quite a lot, which meant that I wasn't able to sit and set a trap, which obviously more casts, more you're going to push the fish away that don't want to feed. And it was obvious that the chaps to my right started catching an odd fish, and the chaps on 5 and 7 were catching well by this point. And I just think whatever carp were in the open water had pushed down away from any sort of disturbance. There was a lot of disturbance where we were. The chaps opposite were casting to the rope. I was chucking to the rope. Matt on my left was chucking to the rope. There was a lot of feeders and a lot of bombs going on in one little space, and I just think probably pushed the fish away a little bit. So I was looking for snookers really, because obviously it's easy to say I'll just sit on a bomb of bread and just keep the fish coming. I'll be patient. But when you're not getting any signs of life, it's hard to do that. I haven't got the patience for that. I'm sure Finn and people like that can just sit and sit and sit, but I can't do that. It's one of my letdowns as an angler, that is. So I'm already thinking it's going to be a low 8 job. I'm thinking peg 7 is probably going to be a bit of a runaway leader. He's got 6 or 7 carp at this point, all good uns. And I'm thinking, right, get in the frame now. Probably winning the match is gone. It's all about consolidating now and getting in the frame. So with that in mind, I'm looking at a frame place now. I'm thinking if I can get to £30, I've got a chance of getting in the frame here today. And they were paying top 4 on the match, so it's a chance to get my money back if I played my cards right. So I decided to have a look on the pole on the Skimmer line, because I thought if I can just bundle together like £10 on this line in the middle of the match or the second half of the match, and then add 2 carp on the long pole later on, then maybe, just maybe, I can pull enough together. The 2 fish I've got already are probably £13–14, plus a few F1s and stuff. So I've probably got £14–15 in the net at this point, something like that. And maybe I could just cobble together enough to limp over to a frame place. So I've gone out, and it felt differently straight away. I don't know, it's like angling intuition, but sometimes you go on the line and you just know there's fish there. I know I've decided to scale down at this point. I've put an 18 on SFL, 09, and I've put that on because I'm thinking, right, I just need to fish for skimmers properly now. Forget any ideas of carp or F1s or anything. Fish for skimmers, fish for silvers. So we've got that orange elastic on. I've gone out and I've sat there, and my 0.6 is just sat there lovely. And you just know when there's fish there, don't you? You get little movements and stuff. Walloped under, and I've struck. 2 meters of elastic come out. Carp's gone surging across the lake. Oh, here we go. Anyway, I played it for a while, adding sections, taking sections off. Even got it onto my top 4 to play it, stripping a bit out the puller, and then eventually it's just gone and gone and gone. And it hasn't broke me actually, it's just pulled out, which is frustrating because that would have been a really handy bonus. It also got me thinking I need to change my elastic. So I've got off my box, took the orange off, I've put the white on, because if I was going to hook another carp, I was never ever going to be getting him out on that gear. That orange zip, it was just too light for the depth. And even the skimmers might have been hard work, you know, dealing with them in that depth of water. So took that off, went in my hold all, got the white out, put the white on the 10 to 12 and went with that. And then I've gone out, I've not fed anything again. I'm happy with how much bait's there, even though carp's been there. Sometimes you catch skimmers best when there's no bait left in your peg, and I felt like that might be the situation now. Got to assume that carp's been there a little while, munching through the bait, gone back on it, and I've caught a skimmer straight away, and a good one as well, like over £1, like a nice fish, perfect. I thought I'm not going to feed again, went out again, got another one, so perfect. Right, we're up and running now, and I've gone out again and got another one. And now I've gone out for a 4th, thinking I'm just going to try and get another one before I feed again. Nothing happened. I think I caught a couple of roach, which I've got to assume the bait's gone now, so in I go with another little ball, just a golf ball with a few maggots in, a few micros in, nothing fancy, nothing too aggressive. Put that in. Time to try the long pole. So we're on the long pole now, and I'm starting to get vibes now. I've hooked this carp on the short line, and now I'm thinking there's a chance I could catch a carp. I've been feeding it as well as I could, 2 pellets religiously, and I've been topping up every 3/4 an hour with a pot full, like of 50 or 60 pellets. The reason I was doing that was because for every time I was feeding, as good as my feeding was with a catapult, a lot of the bait was getting nailed by seagulls, and it was getting hard to actually ping bait because they're absolute, I don't know how they do it, their eyesight must be incredible. And I've set a timer on my phone, I'm going to give it 15 minutes to see if I can catch one. So I've put a timer on a stopwatch, giving it 15 minutes. Anyway, after I've been out there not long, 3 or 4 minutes, I pinged a couple of times, I pinged two, and again, you just get a feeling there's something there. I wasn't getting any indications or anything, but it just felt right. The float was sitting lovely, that 4x18 Cypri, sitting lovely. Sure enough, after a brief wait, absolutely walloped under, unmissable bite, first carp on a long pole. Now it was a steady battle, just shipped him in pretty much, but then came the hard part, actually netting these carp. It's a deep lake this, and playing them on the top kit with a number 4 is quite tricky when you've got, you know, relatively light elastic on. So I've got that black zip on, and the best technique I found in the end was to use the puller, hold the pole pretty much on the joint between the top kit and the number 3 section, and sort of sweep it around my head and try and guide him in. Probably pulling out a little bit more out the puller than what I'd like to on a shallower venue. This worked, and soon enough I've got a nice carp in the net. Perfect. I've got a couple of hours left now. I can probably go on and catch a couple more on the pole, is what I was thinking. Perfect situation to find myself in, a carp on the long pole. So we carp number 1 in the net on the long pole. I'm soon back out. Banded 6mm, just one of the feed pellets, 16B 911, shipped out, laid my rig back in. Now it's important not to get giddy with the feed when you've caught one, because you could start pinging. You've got to remember, you've not been doing that. You've been building the swim up by potting 50 in and then pinging an occasional 2 over the top. It's very easy to sit there when you're waiting for a bite and keep firing 2, and before you know it, you're fed several times in 5 minutes, which is not what you've been doing. So try and be strict. I'm terrible at this. I just get into the habit of just firing loads of pellets in. But I was trying to be strict, but what I was doing instead was feeding 5 pellets twice with a catty and then sitting. That was like resetting the peg with 10 pellets and then sitting and waiting. And it wasn't long before I got another one. Now this one was a bit smaller, but very, very welcome. Most importantly, it was a good sign, and it bought me another 15 minutes or so on this line to try and catch another one. So I really fancied the long pole to catch me another carp or 2, but I also fancied another little run of skimmers, and if they come as quickly as the last 3, then they'd be more than welcome. Now I don't know if some carp moved in onto that ground bait line or what, but I could not get a bite on it. I'd had my joy on that swim, I couldn't catch any more fish on it, and it was getting to the point where I had a decision to make, and I decided to sack that off and fish the final hour on the long pole. Now, I wasn't expecting much action, and I think I got a small one with about 45 minutes to go, and I felt like 3/4 an hour I can catch 2 more. And I think I got a bit carried away with the bait. Exactly what I was on about earlier, being regimented with feed. I was trying to force it, so I'm pinging more pellets. Not large amounts, but I was getting too giddy with how often I was feeding them. I know I was, looking back. I started foul looking at an odd one. There was fish coming into my peg. You could tell what was happening. Nothing for ages, and then all of a sudden you'd fire some bait in and you'd get an odd little sign. So I can assume there was just like a little group of carp out there, backing off, coming back, backing off, coming back. And you'd build it up for 5 or 6 minutes. Then you get an indication that there's one in your peg, it'd wallop under, and I actually fouled up 2 or 3 in a row, which was really frustrating on such a hard day. And all of a sudden I've only got 10 minutes left, and it's like, oh my God, I need another one here, I need another one. 8 minutes to go or something, it's walloped under and I've got one. And not a big one, but a very, very welcome fish. And I'm thinking I've got time, because I'm getting indications every time I feed now. I've got time for another one. And I did hook another one right on the whistle that fell off, which was very, very disappointing. But I ended up with 5 or 6 smallish carp, those 3 skimmers, a few roach, a few F1s. And I felt like I was probably in the running to get in the frame. And I ended up weighing £34.13. Now there was a £33.15 on the other bank, which obviously was very close. There was a £37, which was second, and then Peg 7 had, as predicted, a big 60, £68, something like £66, which interesting, was only 6 carp and a couple of small little ones. Real good stamp of fish, which put me third in the match, which, you know, first time I fished that lake, first time I've been out since September, I'll take that. I was a bit rusty. The decision making was all right, but there was a few little decisions and little patterns that I probably missed. The first one, I think, is very important. I should have fished bomb and bread for longer without committing to the feeder. I know I caught a carp on the feeder, but once I'd put the feeder on, it gave me nowhere else to go in terms of bomb and bread. What I should have tried, I should have had a few extra hook lengths tied up. I should have tried a lot further off the bottom. Maybe those F1s were on the bottom or close to the bottom. Maybe if I'd have come at half depth, 5 foot up or something like that, I might not have caught them. I noticed the chap who won had a long hook length on. I didn't twig it at the time, but now thinking back, that's probably what I should have done. So I'll definitely have some longer hook lengths in my box for next time. Obviously it takes 2 minutes to try it, 1 chuck, and if you catch one, you catch one. So I think popping up bread and being a bit more patient with that would have been a better move. And then if I'm going to fish a feeder next time, have some stems in with some lighter elastic, maybe different hook. I used a KKH, maybe something like a QM1 or an MCM, that kind of hook. Maybe would hold those F1s on a bit better. Not sure. Probably just softer rod and that elastic combo might help. And I might even try a pellet feeder. I prefer a pellet feeder for F1s and stuff. So if I'm going to go down that route, maybe a pellet feeder will be better. But we'll see. I might be going there again next week. So we'll see. We'll see what lake the match is on. I feel like my bomb and bread fishing, I chuck it in lovely. The bomb was right. The hook was right. Everything like that. So that's cool for next week, and I'm happy with that. I just probably need to be a bit more strategic with how I'm going to fish it if I go again next time. The skimmer line, I feel like I should have put more bait in at the start and then not fed it again. I probably should have put like 4 pots full of ground bait with a few odd maggot and stuff in it and created an area. I just put 1 pot full in at the start and tried to fish that out and top it up, but the top ups never really worked. It never really happened that. So I feel like I should have probably put more bait in and left it and just left it and not even fished it for 3 hours. That might have been better. It's obvious that those skimmers didn't feed till late. On the feeder as well, I think probably chucking a small hybrid or a small method with some ground bait on with dead maggots might catch you a few fish, skimmers and stuff. The chap who had 33.15 caught skimmers and F1s on a feeder, so that's worth having in mind. If there's no carp about in the middle of the match, chuck out something that'll catch you a bit of everything. Might catch you a few more fish if it's going to be a low weight day again. The long pole, I was pretty happy with the long pole. The only thing, when there was some fish in the area late on, I did get too giddy with the bait. Not amount of bait, just too regular. I was too regular with my feeding. I should have calmed down, potted some more in, and then got back to my little strategy of feeding 5 twice and waiting. It's very easy when you're pinging pellets to just keep feeding. And even though it's cold, they were definitely responding to the noise. But obviously it's 10 foot deep. They're going to come off bottom, aren't they? So that's something that definitely need to look at for next time. But that long pole, it's lovely fishing that is. I was happy with 3rd place, but I should have been second. I couldn't have won. Don't think I could have won, but I definitely should have been second. £40 should have easily been achievable, and if it had been a bit sharper, that gets to £45, £46. But there you go. That's how it is. This is what these midweekers are all about. I'm trying to get sharp again, trying to find my feet again with fishing, with match fishing in particular. but really happy. It was nice to get the new kit on the box, and the new clothing on, the new side thread, new nets, everything's all new. Getting familiar with the elastics and stuff, because obviously I changed over from Duraslip to zip. Yeah, it's all a learning process. So thanks everyone for watching. Hope that was a real good watch for you. Let us know in the comments below what you think I should have done differently. If you want a bit more info, less info. I've tried to be really thorough because you guys seem to enjoy it when I get thorough on tactics and stuff. And we'll see you again on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and up the Reds. See you again soon.